Well, I am joined now by Things We Missed by Charles Collier, who is the co-editor and lead journalist reporting on all things local government, schools, and community at the Denmark News in Denmark, Wisconsin. Charles, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Alex.
So let's just start with a general overview, Charles, of the Denmark News as a whole. Could you explain for our listeners what the paper is, what it's about, and what you do, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. So we are a small hometown newspaper in rural Wisconsin. We're south of Green Bay, but we're right in the pocket between Brown, Kewaunee, and Manitowoc counties. And so there's generally a lot that goes on, but a majority of our readership is in more of those rural areas with a few small towns, or as they call them, villages, around there. What it's about, we focus a lot on the local government and the local schools. For obvious reasons, those are the things you need to know about when you're living and raising a family somewhere. And we really just try to show, I don't want to say we try to only show the good parts of the community, but I would say I don't think we are as quick to go to sensationalism or scandal or tabloidy kinds of things as some of our competitors are. And I'm not sure whether that's a reflection of the community or something we're doing as far as editorial discretion. Sure. But I do see that as one of our main differences. What I do, I go to all of the village board and school board meetings in Denmark proper. There are a few municipalities elsewhere that I try to stay up on, as well as different county and state news that comes in and affects everything. We're kind of a small operation, so I end up, I don't want to say have to spread my time too much, but I have to stay on top of a lot of different things at once. And to me, that's part of the fun. That's the whole reason I got into it.
Yeah, and being a lead writer, obviously, your time is pretty scarce and spread out, which is probably a fun part of your job, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, deadline days are always fun when you're just trying to funnel a 1,000-pound block of lead into like a pixie stick.
Sure.
That's what I think it's like.
So you kind of touched on it, but it's something a lot of people don't realize about the Denmark News. You guys are an independent paper. When I was in here today, somebody already mentioned, are you guys owned by Gannett, which you're not. You're independent.
Yeah, we get that a lot.
Right, and I believe that. So that's kind of rare, a rare happening in today's day and age, but it's obviously really neat nonetheless. So can you touch on being an independent and what's seen as such, what's known as kind of the corporate media age or conglomerates or large companies where they kind of dominate today's media?
Well, it definitely is a complex line to toe because, right now with everything going on at the federal level and, just the outrage model that's been put forth for large-scale media for 20, 30 years, it's something that we get a lot. A lot of people end up thinking we're either owned by Gannett or some larger paper because that's kind of the general perception of all media.
Right.
Is that it's not coming from where you are out. It's coming from the top down, and outside of crotchety hipsters and old people, I'm not sure anyone really pays much attention to whether or not we're independent or owned by Gannett. The average person on the street, you talk about Gannett, they have no idea what you're talking about. It's just a little company. So everyone knows their little local newspaper, but the USA Today network isn't something that they necessarily connect to each other. Mm-hmm. And so I think while there's not as much name recognition that comes with being associated with Gannett, and the fact that even fewer people know or value the fact that we are an independent paper, I can see when looking at some of the other different operations, I really do see the value of being independent and not necessarily tied to any, not being tied to a larger framework that's outside of what your community actually is. I think we serve people more honestly, and I think there's less wiggle room for us to make anything up or to try and push a narrative one way or another because
it's you.
Yeah, right. Your readership is right down the street from you. They know who you are. You're part of the community, and therefore you're loaded with a certain amount of trust and responsibility in what you put forth. And I'm not sure I don't want to speak for anybody in the newsrooms of those bigger papers, but I'm not sure that same connection to the community they're serving and the responsibility that comes along with that, I'm not sure that those are factors that necessarily play into their editing decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And you kind of brought up, the responsibility you have. I mean, I think it's fair to say most people in this community know you now, and you've been around, about 3 years? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so bringing that up, I mean, you know this paper at this point probably better than anybody on this planet. And you guys have kind of created what I would kind of say is a unique niche within your community. You mentioned you're on basically the border of 3 counties. So is that with the niche, is that something that allows you to be an independent small-town paper and create a full-time gig out of it? Because like I mentioned earlier, it's pretty rare we see independent papers thriving like the Denmark News is. So how does this unique niche created, and how do you keep that relationship with the community so strong?
Well, with almost everything else, I hadn't built this all by myself.
No, right.
Our editing team didn't build it all by themselves. Everybody's always coming in to what has been built before them and making it stronger, making it better, doing whatever you do. So I don't want to take any credit for building the audience here, but I'd say because it's weird because if you're looking at a top-down complete analysis of media consumption demographics, we are very, very, very much a niche publication. But if you look at the Denmark area, we are the only publication in town that's dedicated to it. And so, yes, I think that niche does empower us to be more independent, and it allows us to try a few different things as far as coverage content or narratives or different graphics that you're going to include, what kind of events you're going to cover. We do have space for, let's say, 8th grade graduation, and we can include little tidbits about each person, whereas a bigger paper where they're serving multiple communities and multiple school districts, they don't have that same ability to serve a very specific community. And so I think there's strengths and weaknesses that come with both, and we're always trying to improve, always trying to hear what we can do to get the people who aren't subscribers subscribed. I'd say I've been able to create a full-time gig out of it, but I think a lot of the work that I do isn't something that you put on a time card. Isn't something that you necessarily get paid for. It's all about, again, at least from my perspective, And this is where I envy some of those bigger operations, because they can just have one beat reporter for this topic and this topic and this topic. And whenever a story comes up, you have them on it and you're good to go. Everybody else is working on their little things. With me,
it's you and you only.
Yeah. Well, we have different people in the office where we'll get leads or something like that.
Right.
As far as staying on top, being able to analyze, knowing what the different developments are and what something means in context on a lot of different issues. That's a lot me, and so I'm not trying to put myself up on any kind of pedestal, but there is a lot of time and a lot of work that goes into staying on top of that stuff that you don't do in the office, that you don't put on a time card, that you don't get paid for, because it's all about holding yourself, and I guess holding myself, to the standard of knowledge that I feel comfortable performing my job in, and being an independent paper and being in such a small little community, yes, that definitely opens up a lot of different avenues for me to be able to create enough time and create enough work that I can pay all my bills just on this. Yeah,
and I think that's what makes your job so unique, Charles, is the fact that anybody that knows anything about Denmark, you're the go-to guy, because you probably know it all just in your role. So I guess being the guy that knows so much about a local community, that makes your job, what I would say, both unique and pretty cool, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been fulfilling in ways I never imagined when I first came on.
Sure. So you mentioned earlier a little bit about a competition. You have some competitors. I was going to ask this beforehand, so I'm glad you brought it up. But is there a sense of competition with these bigger papers in the area, like the Appleton Post-Crescent, Green Bay Press Gazette? Even though, I mean, you guys focus on mainly just Denmark community, and I mean, it's a pretty small community. So I mean, some of the greater little townships, but. Is there a sense of competition with those bigger conglomerates, if you will?
I mean, I'll say, there have been times where, because we're a weekly publication, and there have been times where, I've been working on a story of some significance, and as I'm delivering it on Wednesday mornings, I see that Press Gazette has covered the same story, and they also have it on their front page. And it's kind of disheartening. You're just like, oh, crap, because more people are going to see that.
Right.
And but I wouldn't say that competitor or competition is the right word, because we're not going after the same kinds of markets, and we're not trying to deliver the same kind of a product. But I do, I buy those papers every day. At least one Gannett newspaper I buy every day to keep, I guess, maybe keep tabs on the stuff that they're covering, what they've already touched on, and how they're doing it, because that also helps. I mean, being a weekly, it's a weakness and a strength as far as being able to cover content, because with some of the bigger stories, you can see what all the other large models are doing, and you can see the weakness or the points that they may have left out.
Right.
And so then you can kind of fill in that gap. And so I'd say it, I would never, I don't want to work for them. I don't want to work for a really, really large media company, because it's against a lot of what I personally believe and my philosophy on how society can better itself. But I wouldn't say it's competition. I pick up tips and style points and have learned what to look for as I'm doing my coverage through viewing them. However, if they fell apart, I wouldn't necessarily lose any sleep over it.
Okay, fair enough. Last question for you, Charles. I appreciate your time, but finally, I mean, it's pretty simple. What is it going to take for an independent paper in this day and age to continue to strive and succeed like the Denmark News has?
Well, that's the question we've been we've been dealing with for a year and a half, 2 years now. It really will be interesting to see how this younger generation, people who are 21 to 35 right now, how they continue to consume media as they move on, because it's been a trope since the early 80s,
right,
that newspaper and evening news watchers or viewership has been going down, and that it was going to be non-existent in a certain time frame because it's only people 50 years and older that are watching this stuff. But those demographics stayed the same. Even as digital media consumption has gone up and all the other numbers have gone down, it's still that core demographic as time has gone on through 30, 40 years already.
So a lack of a better term, basically when a 49-year-old turns 50, they're more appealing to watch the evening news or whatever, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
No, exactly. They're more likely to take part in the quote-unquote old media.
Okay.
And so, I mean, as with everything, I mean, digital media consumption is really only about 10 years old. So it'll depend how that goes. And a lot of papers, including ourselves, are trying to figure out ways how to merge our content and our reach online without sacrificing the integrity of the print edition. Because I guess we could go off on why I value print another time. But if those demographics continue to absorb media digitally, even as they get older and print and the evening newscasts go away, that'll be really hard to compete, because all of a sudden it's a local operation trying to compete in a sea of international news, and it's impossible. And so there are going to have to be innovative steps on how to integrate and engage people online while still remaining profitable, because that's the biggest thing. Even though if you have ads online, everybody's going past them, so there's no incentive for an advertiser to continue to do it.
Yeah.
So honestly, I don't know. There's a soft spot in my heart for just the print edition, and in my heart of hearts, I feel that there are ways to make that model profitable and valuable and sustainable. It'll just take figuring out the right notes to put the finger on. But I I think merging into digital content and probably doing more stuff like this, like a podcast or audio, or have a short little video about a story where it goes by, I think that'll be the future. Whether or not that's profitable for small operations is
undetermined, right?
Yeah, undetermined, and I would say probably unlikely.
Right.
But that's kind of the beauty of it. You keep fighting and you keep upholding the culture that you want to see in the world, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Exactly. And as you and I have both learned long term in this job and in this industry, every day is a new day. So I mean, it's definitely something to see. So Charles Collier, co-editor and lead journalist of the Denmark News, thank you so much for your time and joining us on Things We Missed.
Well, thank you again, Alex.